Hello, beautiful mamas. As a working mom, sometimes I can really feel scattered, unorganized, or simply just rushing from one thing to another and all over the place. Finding time for myself and finding my sanity can almost feel like an impossible dream. Can you relate? Well, this is why I have created my free Mama's Guide to Creating Balance and Harmony as my gift to you. This guide contains my top 10 tips to creating balance and harmony in your life, as well as 3 beautiful trackers to help you get onto your journey in a fun and simple way. I have found by incorporating daily self-care routines and practices in my life for as little as 5 minutes a day, I am feeling more grounded, centered, and calm. By me tapping into my best version through these practices, I am also a better mom, a better partner, and a better colleague. Well, really, just a better human being in all the ways. So, if this sounds like something that you would like to explore, click on the link in the show notes below and download your free guide today.
We were all born with the innate power of knowing and wisdom within us. The challenge for many of us is that we were taught to seek answers externally instead of searching from within. And this is the reason why so many of us find ourselves going around in circles, searching for new ways, but could never find the way. The womanly way. It's not the way. It's not my way. But it is a pathway to support all of us returning back to self, reconnect with our inner wisdom through loving ourselves, knowing ourselves, and reconnecting with ourselves.
Tell me and be honest. Tell me should I've known.
So we can start to find our own way as modern day women. Are you interested? Well, sit back, relax, and welcome to this amazing journey.
So I literally just jumped off my interview with a fellow 444 Media sister, Monica Bermudez. Super grateful for Monica to come onto the show, but also I had so much fun. In this episode, we talked about everything and anything spiritual. We talked about her path, and there's so much alignment with her journey and my journey, both coming from a very logical background. She's from engineering, from architecture, but also just our spiritual journey that we've gone on. There's just so much connection and so much alignment. But also what I loved about this episode is that we're able to go down rabbit holes and not from the perspective of who's right and who's wrong, but going in with an open mind, talking about some of the taboo topics, stirring the pot a little bit. We talked about spirituality. We talked about religion, whether the spirituality is the same as religion. We talked about what frequency means. And we'll also talk about how we can be more connected to our soul, our mission, our purpose, our heart. And she even was so kind to offer a heart opening, heart awakening exercise so we can be more connected to our heart center, but also our purpose. I love that so much, and I really, truly hope that you enjoy this episode as well, and it's going to provide you with insight, with clarity, with, I guess, more curiosity, and perhaps you want to go down more rabbit hole with us. All I can say is come in, join us, have a cup of tea with you, a cup of coffee, whatever beverage that you like, and just lean back and receive this episode. It's juicy, it's beautiful. I'm just so full of I'm full of energy right now because I feel joyous, I feel connected, I feel enlightened, and I'm just in love with life right here, right now. And that's the powerful energy that Monica brings to the space. So without further ado, I'm going to hand the mic to Monica. Sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I do. Hello, 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 hello. Welcome to this episode of the Womanly Way podcast. Wow, I'm super excited. I'm also feeling a lot of energy. I think it's just because we're interviewing such a powerhouse today, and obviously with all the things in the sky that's happening as well. If you are I guess, frequent listener to our podcast, probably you're feeling it too. So today it gives me absolute pleasure and joy to have Monica Bermudez on our podcast. Did I pronounce your last name right? How do you actually pronounce it properly?
Yeah, it's okay. It's Bermudez.
Bermudez. Okay, I just want to
Yes.
make sure I get it right. So Monica is a cosmic light language channeler, chakra alchemist, and a Lemurian High Priestess. She works with many divine beings, including dragons, ascended masters, goddess energy, cosmic, galactic beings, all the things that I love. But I think what's magical about Monica is really her wealth of knowledge. You know, she is, for me, I am a manifesting generator in my human design, and I can feel her energy just like she taps into all these different things. I'm like, how? How do you know all these things? I guess it's no surprise to you guys as well. She's also a #1 international best-selling author for the book called Cracking the Sacral Heart Code, a channeled alchemist formula and practical guidebook. Of course, the reason that we know each other because we're part of the 444 media family. She's the host of her very unique podcast, which I love, Ascended Earth, the Transfiguration of the New Human. So welcome, Monica.
Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I'm so honored to be here and for that lovely message as well that you just shared. And yeah, so I love to have this connection with our host family of, podcasters here for 444 Media, sharing our uniqueness and diversity in our own different podcasts. And I also love your podcast too, so I listen to it as well, because it's good to hear different perspectives from others. And that helps with the collective. It's like putting puzzle pieces together, right, of information.
Exactly. I guess that it's a really good segue from the intro to my first question to you. Like, what's your journey? What's your journey of ascension? Essentially, how were you born awake, or what's your journey of discovering your gifts and your path, and how did you become so knowledgeable in all your awesomeness?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's a great question. I was actually born partially awake. There was a part of me that knew that I was different from others. Because when I was little, I would know exactly what someone was thinking before they said it. And I knew that I couldn't tell them that I knew that because it would scare them. So it was kind of like this weird knowingness of like having this ability, but at the same time knowing the level that they were in, they weren't ready yet to like hear somebody say, like, I'm hearing all your thoughts and your telepathy and like communicating with you in this way.
That would be scary.
Yes. So I grew up, very interested in a lot of the mysteries of the psychic and the intuition. And I ended up being a part of this mystical organization, nonprofit organization that I learned a lot of applying or practicing on my own psychic and intuitive abilities as well. And it embraced, that aspect of me. And I realized, that I had so much of this growing up. There was other aspects in me, though, that I had questioned because I felt very non-human growing up. I definitely felt very cosmic and galactic, more so than the people who I met, like in my mystical organization. And for that, I felt like there really wasn't too many people I could talk to about, like openly. And it wasn't until I went through like this divorce that I was able to quantum jump into this other awakening aspect of me, of my soul, which really opened up my soul contract agreements and stepping more into my purpose here on earth. But a lot of it was trial and error. So I was trying to like work on my own healing, but the more, the more healing I was doing myself, the more it was also opening up these other portals inside of me of my gifts and talents. One of them being channeling light language. And I was remembering this actually when I was meditating and reflecting back on my younger years of life and thought about, well, how is it that I didn't suspect this other aspect of me in light language? But I remember when I was in groups doing meditations, like guided meditations, in my head, I would hear this language. It was like this light language. I was like, where is that coming from? Like, and I thought it was just like my imagination, like nothing, I just kind of brushed it off. I didn't really think anything of it. But I think in that moment when I was doing those guided meditations, I was also transmitting without realizing that was happening until like later on in life that I started to learn more about myself and tapping in more in my own abilities and talents. And I connected with other channelers and mentors who knew nothing about me, and they would confirm everything that I was feeling. So I really thought that I was just making this up or that it was just my ego playing tricks on me. So it was a lot of that trial and error, the doubts in myself, and my own ability, which are the messages that I share now with others, and encourage them. So a lot of it, based on my own experience, where a lot of my wisdom comes. But there's also this other inner wisdom that I carry from my many past lives that I've been remembering some of those aspects as well. And I'm very Lemurian for sure. I knew that growing up because when I first read one of my first books, it was on the history of Lemuria, and that opened up this other portal inside of me of some kind of remembrance. And I was very much into wanting to know more and more and more, what is it about Lemuria and stuff. And those are clues, right? When you feel super excited about things that you really want to know more about, they're the ones that, give you the clue as to where you may have come from, where you have some connections with, but also like maybe some of your passions and your purpose for now. That was, probably a long answer, but
No, that's a great answer. Out of that, my curiosity is around, what are some of, maybe give us an example of one of your trial and errors, how you would, what aspect of, I guess, the spiritual side were you playing with, and what was the result of that? Is there any memorable, like, things you've tried and that's kind of either give you an aha moment, and how did you know whether it's the right path or the wrong path to go down to? Because I think we're at the time where a lot of people are interested or curious, or maybe they have these clues, as you were talking about, in terms of spirituality or playing with the different dimensions. And I think at the beginning, a lot of us are trialing things, but how do you actually know what you're trying? Well, once you've gone down that path of trialing, let's say Reiki, for example, that it's the thing for you.
Yeah. So, I mean, my background, my educational background is actually in engineering and business degree. So I thought that was going to be my whole life. And I didn't really care, to start up a business and, doing the kind of work that I do in the spiritual aspect. And so that's where I was in doubt, the trial and error right there of like, still trying to continue this path of where I really felt this is, where I study. And why would I start something that I haven't even studied? Like I haven't studied any Reiki or any of this other like energy technique. I mean, I was pretty open-minded to a lot of it, right? Like I had a lot of mystical background. I knew about energy and all this other stuff, but it's not something that I wanted to do as a business or care to do, like to come out in front of public and talk to anybody. So that's why I thought that maybe my ego's playing tricks on me So there was this back and forth going on with my guides and myself, with my own doubt getting in the way pretty much. So that was part of the trial and error that I was doing, like the bloopers, I guess human bloopers, another word that I use. But like, so I kept getting in the way of myself, what the guidance was trying to give me in the moment and receive the information. And so I kept asking him, well, do you want me to study Reiki? And so they're like, no, that's not what we're saying. We're saying that you have a very unique energy to you. And I said, no, I'm not buying that. So then I was guided to go meet with these other channelers at the time, energy channelers. And they were very specific of to who, And so I said, okay, I'm gonna give it a try, and see if this is like some BS. So of course I ended up going on this cruise with one of them, and she was channeling light language as well. And I didn't really care particularly about me channeling light language either. And so but I was guided to go talk to her. And so I, went on this cruise that I was following her. And they were really insistent to really try to see about connecting with her. And so my room somehow ended up right next to her room, which is, talk about the synchronicity of things, like the universe really giving you the message. And so finally I went up, I got the courage to go talk to her and asked if I could really have just a private session with her. And so I did. And everything just kind of fell into place, how everything just lined up, for me to have this meeting with her, all just to confirm exactly what they had just been telling me. And without me even sharing anything about myself to her, she knew nothing about me. I had to go to somebody completely neutral, right? She said exactly what the messages that I was receiving. And so I'm like, okay, you got my attention now. So
you guys are like, told you, we told you.
right. So it's like, okay, it's human bloopers going on. But it's like, okay, you have my attention now. I'll try to get myself out of the way and pay more attention to what you're sharing. But it's a human thing, right? Normal thing, right? To have this doubt, because in a way, though, we forget, we fall into what we call this the matrix, right? Of this Earth, the school of Earth, that we're all here learning, and then we forget our origins in our own soul, and we get so much involved in our human self, like the veils, right, of this of the illusions, and we may have studied something, but then we're being called to really step into another role. And that role is really in our soul that has been already engraved in us. And so there is that part of us that's remembering as part of the process of the awakening, right? So, just paying attention, really connecting to your heart is one of the emphasis that I really make, because if we're coming from a wounded heart, it makes it much harder to really listen to your inner guidance, which is one of the things, that happened to me, that I was going so much doubt, that after getting out from a divorce, I needed to really heal my own heart from, that really revisit a lot of my own inner patterns, like toxic patterns, sabotaging patterns that I had inside myself, because in every, relationship we have, there's a reflection of those wounds, coming in from the other. So, the more that I started to clear a lot of that inside of myself and my own heart, the more I was tapping into my soul remembrance, and then trusting more, myself, and listening more to that inner guidance. And otherwise, it's going to be back and forth into this doubt and getting in the way of what your higher guidance is trying to give to you, rather than the ego getting, louder and louder, keeping you in one place small, or in a comfort zone.
I love that. I think, we haven't really had a lot of chats like this, even though we've been doing a podcast in the same network family for a year now, but there's so much similarity in your journey and my journey. And really, from talking to you, it really allows me to tap into my geekiness as well. And, one thing that came to me was I realized a lot of us in the spiritual path now also came from a very logical background. Like you came from an engineering background. I actually still in a construction world. And I truly believe that spirituality and science and practicality are actually all interlinked. If you think about historically, the scientists are actually also very spiritual people. So, with permission, I would like to go down to the geeky, sciencey,
Yeah,
spiritual
let's do it.
rabbit hole. When we first started discussing about, let's do a joint interview together, it was when I posted a post when I was going down my own rabbit hole in understanding what frequency really means. Because, I think I shared a story about how to me, I would, even now, or even until recently, I'm like, I don't feel frequency. Even though I'm a spiritual person, like when people talk about, frequency therapy, they're like, oh, I can feel when I take this product, I can feel frequency tingling up my spine. I'm like, no, there's got to be a more scientific way to relate this thing that we can't see, that we can't hear. It's only based on feelings to something a bit more practical for the everyday human beings. Because we're talking about ascension, it should not be something for the select few, right? So my analogy that I came up with was about, if you just imagine there's 88 keys on the piano, every part of our body is part of this piano with 88 keys. And if one key is out of tune, whatever music you play is going to be out of tune. And that's when our body is out of tune. So I'm curious. Obviously, I'm still in this path of discovering more and learning more about frequency and bringing it more to the 3D language so more people can understand and experience it. So I wonder, what is your interpretation of what frequency is? How do you actually describe it to a everyday human being that's just starting on their spiritual or frequency journey? And then we'll start with that, and then we'll obviously go down the rabbit hole a bit more.
Yeah, so from a scientific, point of view, and also like from an energy, standpoint, it's really like how I look at patterns, really, because it's an occurrence, right? How it occurs constantly in certain rhythm, certain movement, right? If you ever look at frequency from like a wavelength standpoint, from those who are engineering, not to get too specific, right? You could see like the wavelengths, like this movement. So it's moving in a certain time frame, right? The rhythmic and pattern like, right? And it forms certain patterns. So that's, in a linear standpoint, that's what happens when it's moving very slow. You can actually see it. But when it's moving really fast, like really, really fast, right? The graph starts to like look really all over the place, like crazy. So it's like you could say it's a pulsating type of energy, right? Form of vibrational energy as well. So yeah, there's something, about like the energies is consistent with like certain types of like frequencies. If you're in a low vibration, like lower energy type, the frequency will be moving a little bit slower, the pattern, right? Whereas if you're in a higher state of like vibration and you're connecting to your higher guidance, for instance, that energy frequency is moving a lot faster. It's very hard to like see it on the graph, but it's just, can look very different. And I like to think of it though, like kind of like sacred geometry. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Sacred geometry is like a universal language. It's also a form of light language too, in the art form. But there's constantly changing, right? The shapes are always changing back and forth. It's like this energy weaving of like stuff that's moving around and is dancing, together in its own universal rhythm. And all of that's different types of frequencies moving in different points, different times, different multidimensional selves. So that's the best way that I can describe, what frequency is, what's going on with that. So yeah.
I love how you talk about secret geometry as well, because, I think what a lot of people are not aware of is everything has got a frequency, even the table, the chairs that we're sitting on. They might be denser energy and therefore denser frequency, but there's energy in everything. And I think one thing to clarify as well is that denser frequency does not mean, or actually higher frequency does not mean high energy all the time. You know how some people are like, well, you're always positive, so therefore you're always in high frequency. High frequency, even though the flow chart goes quite crazy, it doesn't always mean that I have to be a crazy person to be in high frequency, right? I think that's something that I'm seeing a lot of people associating frequency and energy with. And I think that's a misconception that it's worth discussing. What's your thought about that, Monica?
Certainly, I think from a 3D perspective, that might be the case. But there's more, right, to the universe than what scientists are really haven't really yet discovered. And when we talk about the quantum realm of things, there's a lot of energy that is invisible, and that scientists don't have the tools yet to really, do the measurements, but they're catching up to a lot of things. And so I've been following a lot of different like spiritual scientists. I call them spiritual scientists because they're very consciously awake, and they share a lot of interesting information. Like one of them is Greg Braden, right? He talks a lot about heart math. And I don't know if you're familiar with like heart math, but they do like a lot of studies of like the heart and the measurements. They actually do measurements on the electromagnetic radiation of the heart itself, that it does expand, outward for a certain amount of feet. But the only reason why it reaches that certain amount of feet is because the equipment they have is very limited. But I feel like the heart energy can extend a lot further. So when we are in a state of joy, for instance, I do feel like the frequency is in a much like, higher state of like energy of that, because it's pulsating at a much faster rate of, of vibration. And so it is like the energy of what, can shift us into these other like higher realms and multidimensional selves. So I do feel there is a lot more that scientists are yet discovering that are coming to the surface. Technology is advancing really fast, and part of that is because of the Uranus energy that we've been in for, some time now, and is bringing about like revolutionary type technology and findings that people are like realizing, waking up to that, like and discovery of things. Like you hear about like certain like these other spiritual sciences talking about like discoveries in Mars, and really fascinating like information. Some of it like our origins of us, in the earth. So yeah, because I was just in a conference about ancient civilizations, so I was like listening to a lot of their findings on that through the Gaia Network. So I don't know if you heard of the Gaia Network, but yeah, so
Love it.
yeah, it's one of my favorite channels. But a lot of the information they talk about there is really fascinating to, what they talk about with frequency and vibration and energy. So I don't know, that's just my take on that. So
All right, let's go down the rabbit hole even further. I love how you talk about spiritual scientists, because that's really linking spirituality and science. What do you think is the link between, like, how do I word this? So we're saying, basically what we're saying is science is linked to frequency. Frequency is linked to spirituality. So what do you think is, obviously we're talking about science is catching up with spirituality, right? But if we go back to ancient civilizations, what do you think is the relationship between science, art, and spirituality? And if we want to go down even deeper, what's your definition of spirituality?
so spirituality is like the essence of us, right? And how we express ourselves. And we all have our own frequency and our own vibration as well. And so there is this whole evolution of our own spirituality and our own growth, with that, and how we connect with the universe, which is really inside of us as well. One of the things that I want to say, though, like when it comes to science and spirituality and what's been going on, that I've noticed it's been trending a lot for these past like 20 years or so, and it's going quantum exponentially right now, is that before meditation was frowned upon, right? For a very long time.
And it's not that long ago, right? It's like,
Yeah, right. If you
even
think about it, it's not.
no,
It's
even
still
up to the
interesting.
80s, it's still a bit, especially in the Western world, it's like,
Mhm.
hippie.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. They will always like judge it as being hippie, but it's not always hippie. Okay, it's been an ancient, ancient thing that's been going on, right, for a very long time. It's just part of us has forgotten that. And so what happens is that recently scientists have been doing a lot of studies on people who meditate. So they would take a lot of the monks from like these temples, right? And they would do experiments on them. Like they would actually connect them, hook them to these wires, right, to study their brain and see how their brain looks when they're meditating. And so they would find that you could see it on the wavelengths, right? The electromagnetic, patterns of the brain and all that. And it would produce, certain like brain wavelengths, right? Like in the meditation, you have like I think the theta or something like that, like stage, which is pretty close to like when the sleeping stage, so you're pretty much like quieting your mind and connecting into these higher, super conscious of yourself, your higher self. And so that's, what scientists were pretty much putting the pieces together from like what spirituality, what has been practiced for eons, in the temple with the monks, are now coming into the scientific realm of proving that there is something going on there with this frequency of energy, right? And so there is this spirituality connection with that in science. And so science and art and spirituality have always been together since ancient times. And that is returning now because we are remembering that it makes sense that it should be a part of it, because one cannot coexist without the other. There is this interconnection, connectedness of the two. A lot of the technology that we're building mimics us in a way, right? The human form. Like, for instance, the cell phone kind of mimics us. It's a transmitter and a receiver. We're also a transmitter and a receiver through our chakra system that's receiving information through divinity, right? If you think about like the pineal gland, the pituitary glands, those are transmitters and receivers. So we're really like the original technology. And and now you have this artificial intelligence, right? Like the robots that are mimicking us in a way. But now you're talking about putting in consciousness, right? And there is, that link to our spirituality is our consciousness as well. And so that's where science and all of that's connecting together. So there is an art to all of this, right? To me, we are a working piece of art, because we have, this ability to be able to express ourselves in a very artistic and creative way. So technology in itself can be an art in how it's designed and how it's put together. So all of that, has a connection with one another. There is an art to meditation, right? And then you bring in some of this like science into it, it's measuring your brain wavelengths, and seeing what's going on. And then, on top of that, scientists also measure like the monks without, being in meditation, but just overall how their brain is because they've been meditating their whole life. And so they notice that their brain wavelengths is much different from the average person who doesn't like, do it as constantly as they do, but their brain actually looks happier. So yeah, so that's what the measurements are showing, and these are like the wavelengths that are shown in that monitor does correspond to the frequency that we were talking about, so you're really measuring the frequency of your brain in association to the energy of the meditation. So, but yeah, so that's pretty much how I would connect the dots, pretty much.
That is so interesting. I was actually listening to another podcast the other day. They were talking about how creativity and artistry is actually linked. They talk about channeling information and how really that's linking our intuition to our creativity and then to our connection to spirit. So I guess my question was, your book is obviously a channeled book. What defined as a channel book? Like from a practical sense, someone would say, well, I wrote this, right? Maybe I'm a bit more creative than the other people, or sometimes we may say you don't need creativity in order to write. So, what's your definition of channeling, and what was that experience like to channel a book compared to if you just use your logical mind to write something?
Yeah, so it was more connecting to the heart, right? Of like the message that I was receiving, like getting out of the way and actually receiving the information. It's like getting a download. You could, it could be equivalent to like an inspiration, right? And you feel like that moment, you get this aha moment in that, but it resonates and it feels just right in your heart. So there's a nice, flow to it and it flows naturally out of you. And so that is to me like a channeling, an art in the flowiness of the universe, letting the information come through you, through your higher guidance, which connects to your heart, your heart chakra. So that's really how it felt to me when I received the information because it came through as an alchemical formula. And I studied a lot of the alchemists and the different stages for a long time. But in that moment, it felt that it was just right to bring it in to talk about the Sacred Heart, which is one of the biggest aspects that I talk to about, that I still talk about the heart chakra a lot, but our sacred space within. And then just pretty much using the alchemical stages to alchemize your heart, which is something that I did for many years. So, and I also use this, with clients as well in the different sessions, private sessions. And so this is like the book itself is more like a condensed version of like putting it into a practical guidebook of these formulas that one can use for themselves to alchemize their own heart, like their wounds, right? Toxic patterns, and really working on your own self, like the shadow work, and bringing this completion, this wholeness in the heart, because that is actually one of my most unique codes that I hold is the molding of the heart. And it's just like molding of the upper and the lower hearts together. Like it's a very unique way that I work, with the energy. And so in the book, I provide certain like guided meditations that I was, inspired to share with others, to help them as well to be as a practical self, empowerment book for others. So it's just being like a facilitator, more than anything than just like, I don't want anybody depending on me or depending on anybody else, but really what I emphasize is being independent and being independent of your own love and independent of your own intuition and your own abilities. And I realize that so many people out there who are channeling and stuff, but that's where I emphasize be your own independent channeler. So with that comes, your own discernment of your own heart, and being aware of, what resonates with you in that moment and what is, good for you to receive, right? So that's really where I feel that channeling for me was my own experience.
And I think it's also, I describe it as a flow in terms of a creative outlet.
Mm,
I wrote my book, it's really about my own personal story, but it just flows. When you start typing, it's like, it's almost
yeah.
feel like something took over and you could be sitting there for an hour, but it feels like 15 minutes and you just continually, there's a flow to
Mm,
it when you're
mm,
channeling. But I love what you said about, it's really about, I think in a way, it's really taking the power back, taking the control back and
mhm,
not giving control out to someone else or to someone external to us. And
mhm.
really, it's a practice, right? It's a
Yeah.
muscle we can exercise in terms of be more connected to ourselves. And I love how you say it's molding of the upper heart and the lower heart. I think most people are not aware. If you haven't been onto the spiritual path, not a lot of people are aware that we actually have an upper heart.
Yeah.
But also, when you were talking about it, I'm seeing it almost like physically connecting,
Mhm.
the higher self
Yeah.
with our 3D,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
we're not touching your heart physically. We're energetically connecting them. So,
Yes, energetically.
yeah.
Yes. Thank you
I
for
just had
that.
this
Yes.
funny meme of like people thinking, are you touching my
Yeah.
heart? How are
It's
you doing that?
energy molding of the upper heart chakra, which, chakra it means like this energy wheel, really is a Sanskrit, term for it. But really you can look at it as like a psychic center also. And they're also portals. So they can be activated as portals as well. And, because of all these energetic shifts that we're going through right now, like some of the solar flares and then other cosmic light codes that are coming into the earth right now are being received in the cells within our own chakras as well, activating other aspects of our DNA. There's a lot of hidden aspects of the DNA that haven't yet been uncovered. So a lot of the junk DNA, that so-called junk DNA, is not really junk DNA. It actually has meaning and purpose. And so that's what these light codes are doing, is waking up a lot of that other DNA that scientists before would call junk DNA. Whereas the spiritual scientists are now finding that that's not the case. So yeah, I mean, it's important to say too that I feel like a lot of authors do end up channeling, but don't realize that they're really channeling, you know.
And I think it's the same with any creative outlets. You know, even though it might start as an idea, I truly believe any artist, anyone who's involved in any form of artistry,
Mhm.
it's really them having a channel or a direct. It's almost like you've got a direct phone line to,
Yeah,
you know, to that creative outlet, to a way where you're communicating with higher energies in order to bring any codes forward. So I really see, any art form, even movies, that's done in a, I guess, connected way, because there are movies that are done especially to make money. There are books that's written especially just to make money. But anything that's done through a creative outlet is really
yeah,
the way that spirit trying to communicate and connect with us.
yeah. Yeah, so, a lot of movies, interesting that you mentioned the movies, because I found like some movies, there's some truth to them, even though they're fiction. Like Matrix, I feel it's like documentary of our lives. Of being stuck in a matrix of the illusion. Sounds so appropriate, right? For now, like
And
part
there
of
are
the
also
awakening
messages,
process.
right? The messages
Yeah.
trying to tell you, hey, this is going to happen soon.
Yeah, right. Did you ever hear about the author called Arthur C. Clarke? He
Uh,
wrote
no,
he wrote a lot of scientific fiction books in the early 1900s, like science fiction books. And
are they
he wrote a
really
lot of
useful?
he wrote a lot of books about satellite communication.
Mm,
Fiction. It was fiction. So guess what we have now?
satellite communications.
Exactly. So I feel like even with the authors who are doing like fiction writing are channeling something in some way, I recently met this other author because I was in Glastonbury for this other group event. And there was this author there who writes fiction books. And one of her fiction books was about Merlin. And so she was describing it to me. It's like, well, that sounds just like Merlin. I don't really think you're writing fiction. I think you're writing the truth.
But I think this is
So,
the
yeah.
thing. Like sometimes our world isn't ready for the truth, right? So
Yeah.
I think a lot of the ways, like even I was listening to another podcast. They were talking about, is Shakespeare a real person, or
Mm,
was he formed by a group of people that just wanted to provide these hidden meanings as the way of life? Because back in those days, if you're a
yeah.
mathematician or a scientist that's promoting these new spiritual thinkings, you
Oh,
get
yeah.
crucified, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there was, authors who would hide it through fiction, like Leonardo DiCaprio would like do certain art, right? But there is actually meaning in his art, symbolism, which a lot of people are finding. Like, if you really pay attention to its symbolism and the study of his numbers and how he would draw the certain angles, right, to the shapes, like he was doing some kind of sacred geometry there too, but he was hiding his messages in there, like mysticism and the occult and the mystery and, the things about life and the truths about life, about our soul. He would hide it in the art.
Yep. Nothing's accidental.
Right, exactly. And the same
So
thing happened like in the Middle Ages, Dark Ages, right? Where the alchemists, they call them the alchemists, but they had a lot of alchemical art. If you ever like see some of it's very hidden, like deep symbolism in there, and a lot of it has to do with the ascension and reaching the top of the mountain. And you will see a lot of the symbol of the sun and the moon, right? Which was the feminine and the masculine energy coming together. So that was their way of communicating about making ourselves whole to be able to ascend. Um, so yeah, so there's definitely like a lot of that.
definitely another rabbit hole for today, I think.
Yeah, I wish I had some like pictures to show you. So it's something that I've been like looking at for like years, right? About a lot of their art and a lot of hidden gems in their symbolisms.
We can definitely do another
Really,
complete different episode all on symbolisms and
yeah,
definitely
that would
share
be
screen.
fun. That would be fun if
Yeah.
I could pull up like in the background, right? Have the picture of like an alchemical, art.
Watch this space. So what's your thought on spirituality and religion? Do you think they're the same or do you think
No.
they're different?
They're
I
not
just
to
like
me
to stir
though.
the pot and see how deep down the rabbit
Well,
hole we can
I've
go.
been stirring the pot for a while, as you noticed, sometime when I was going back and forth with like Shane on the chat room. But I don't really feel they're the same. I mean, if you're religious, yeah, you could have some spiritual aspect, to that, but religion though, to me follows like a certain set of rules, right, and standards, and you're really limited to being independent thinker in a way, unless you go to a church who's very open to it, right? But my personal experience with the church hasn't been like the best. So I could never like be able to question like or talk about, other things that we're talking about now. I feel like in my past life, I have been crucified and I have been like burned at the stake and hanged and all sorts of things and witch hunted, for being very different. So it's not by chance that we come here with these abilities, again, because that means we had them before in the past lives. And so that was part of the reason too why I was so afraid to come to be on the spotlight and be able to talk to people because I had remembered part of that trauma where I had been doing that before. And every time I did that, I would be burned at the stake or something.
My
It's like, I
higher
don't want
self
to
is
do
just
this.
like cheering you and going like, me too, me too.
It's like, I don't want to do this again. I'm done with it. Like, but that was been my personal experience with this. A lot of the stuff that I've been healing, right? So I feel like being spiritual is really your own independent connection to your own source that we all have the ability with. And religion is, its own standards, it's like more man-made. If anything, there's human interpretation, let's just say. And men, it's really more patriarch if you think about it, right? Because it's really the feminine, the females haven't really been like viewed in the best of light. If you look at, the Catholic, for instance, or even like in the Christian religion, like Mary Magdalene was looked as a prostitute, but it wasn't really the
Not
case.
true.
But the female's never been looked at, in a great light. It's been more patriarch, emphasis of energy, and a lot of that's being rebalanced now, which is what's going on. And so yeah, but it's interesting when I went to Italy at the city of Assisi, where Francis of Assisi is from. I don't know if you heard like the Saint Francis, So I went to his hometown, and it was really interesting because I like to visit like really old churches for some reason, maybe bringing back some of the nostalgic feelings when I was like living in those churches or
The
whatever.
emphasis on really old.
Yeah, really ancient, like
Yeah.
Middle Ages, type 1400s, but they're still around, which is like really nice, right? When you visit Europe, you see a lot of those churches there. And I went to some of these churches there, and they had a lot of female presence there, more so than in any other churches that I've seen. And I thought that was really interesting that they had that. So I felt like maybe some of the churches still hold some of that tradition, wisdom, but some of it's still kind of like lost, and some of its doctrine and stuff, and it's been interpreted in their own way. There's, hidden truths as well, that haven't been yet revealed. And I feel like a lot of that's going to start being revealed, and it's going to shock a lot of people into like, complete numbness, and to the point that it's time to wake up. Really just like question like the narrative, that you're being fed. A lot of things like with me, like when I was in the church, like when I was younger and I was going to church, because by background, by title, I'm Catholic, but I don't practice it anymore. But when I used to go, I used to question a lot what the father would say. Like, for instance, he would say, like, God is all loving, but then God is punishing you. It just contradicted what I was feeling about God. Like, and so that's where I really felt that I was very different.
I'm going through the same process as well about hell, because I'm actually a Buddhist.
Oh, okay.
Through family lineage.
Yeah.
But I question a lot of it too, because if you read a lot of Buddhist texts, it's also about if you don't believe in Buddha, you go to hell. There's a lot of stories
Oh,
about how they resurrect dead people through, chanting
yeah.
whatnot
Yeah.
from hell to heaven. And I always question that. I'm like, well, if Buddha loves us so much, why do we still have to go to hell?
Yeah, because hell is what we make of it, and heaven is what we make of it here on earth.
Yeah,
Don't wait till, death to see what you get. Make the most of it now, and
exactly.
but yeah, that's exactly right. It's the questioning the narrative, what you're being fed. Where is it coming from? Why did it start that way? And why is that message being fed to us, And that's part of the awakening process to really, start remembering certain aspects of ourselves, because our soul knows, our soul holds so much wisdom. It's like walking akashic records, that we hold inside of us. And all of us have the ability to tap in at any moment, right? And connect to our own source, our own higher guidance. You don't need to go to a building for that, or go someone else to be your, medium or whatever,
Or
for
take some
that.
mushrooms for that.
Right. Yeah, there you go, mushroom. But yeah, so I mean, it's our own independence, and that's what I emphasize. Um, and that's part of me facilitating and being a catalyst being that triggering others. And if that means, triggering is the word I use, activation for triggering, because if people get triggered by what I say about religion, then it's actually activating something in them.
I love the word activation, because what it meant is really, it provides a different perspective and makes you go, wait a minute, if you
Yes.
wish to do so. And I really, and I think this is the link between your podcast and mine, the womanly way we often talk about.
Mm,
I'm not here to say that my way is right. All I'm
hmm.
offering is a different perspective.
Yes.
So, on the note of a different perspective, do you think that, if somebody wished to do so, if your soul calls to go down a spiritual path, what would you say, with your experience, are the top, let's say, top three things that it's an easy starting point for anyone who wish to go down this journey?
Oh, to tap more into your own like spirituality and awakening.
Yeah, how
Um,
do you actually, what are the, let's say, first three steps that you would recommend, or first three practices that you would recommend as an easy start?
yeah. The easiest thing that I did, when I was after the divorce and I was really doubting myself, the first thing I did a lot of hiking. I went outside a lot, like almost every weekend. And I would spend long hours like outside in the mountain with trees. And the more that I did that, the more that it was actually healing my heart. And at the same time, I started to hear more of my inner guidance and really, paying attention to what was being said as well, and trying to work with my doubt in that. But it helps because like nature, which is, we're a part of nature, and nature is a part of us, which is so important that we reconnect ourselves, our roots back to the way, we used to be. I think in ancient times, it was a very big deal, a very big emphasis that we, spend a lot of time in nature, a lot of times doing rituals outside as well, and so just even walking outside and getting fresh air, you're already opening yourself up to your own higher guidance and your own intuition, to your own spiritual aspect of yourself. And at the same time, it's very healing. And I still do that, to this day when I get into my daily routines and I really need that break. And that break is my nature, fresh air, or getting some air outside. Like if you could go up a mountain, it's even better because that's where a lot of fresh air is. And mountain energy is so powerful and important, right? And then the second thing that I would recommend is doing meditation. And meditation includes like you could do the meditation outside, right? When you're outside and connecting with the trees and the creatures or the animals, the birds, hearing the birds chirping themselves is like a certain sound to it that's very calming and very beautiful to the heart. But just starting off meditation by just doing that, focusing sounds of bird. And if there's a river, hearing the sounds of the river, right? And because meditation is a focused energy. And I know like sometimes when you're starting off for the first time, the monkey brain can get in the way. But that's how I recommend if you're starting for the first time to really focus your attention, maybe just on the bird sounds, or even like a river sound. And that will just build on your focus, and then you start tapping more into your own higher guidance without even realizing that you are. Just comes in naturally, starts coming in the flow. And lastly, though, that's to ground yourself. And so the fastest way you ground yourself, having bare feet on the ground, as much as you can. If you can always do like a meditation that you have your bare feet on the ground, touching, and that also brings in, some of that energy and just focusing that attention. And a lot of spiritual scientists are finding that even our own imagination, we can bring that into our reality as, they're doing the measurements and all that. And what, I found that I also was listening to this recent like podcast and they had this person who her whole emphasis is on grounding. And so what she's finding is that with grounding is also like resetting your nervous system and also like helping with like even certain diseases and all this other stuff. And it was a really interesting discussion on it. And so they asked, about like the animals. Well, there's like animals that are in shelters, right? Don't get as much outdoors. And then you have the animals who are outside all the time. And you'll find that a lot of animals outside don't really get as much disease as an animal that's sheltered. So an animal, like you hear a lot about your pets, right? Your dog or your cat getting cancer and stuff. But an outside animal, you don't hear about that because they usually just shake it off through the ground. And so connecting ourselves, it's like plugging ourselves back into the earth, right? Pretty much because we are part of the earth and the earth is part of us as well. There is this electromagnetic energy that goes through our chakras of our feet, and that is very empowering and also like recharging ourselves in a way. So those are the three easiest things to do as a starting point.
That's great. I think just on the note of the feet, if you know Chinese medicine, the bottom of our feet has got the most meridian point. So
Yeah.
therefore, it's got the most sensors to absorb the Earth's energy.
Yeah,
But
I
also
believe that.
so circling back to frequency, right? The Earth has got the natural frequencies that we need as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And if we connect it to earth, what that means is essentially it heals your body through the earth frequency to then
so
tune
true.
your body back to its natural frequency.
Yeah, and that's what I love about Chinese medicine wisdom, which is an ancient wisdom that, China holds as well. And I feel like a lot of that is coming back, because to a lot of people are starting to remember that as well. And many of the spiritual sciences are really like starting to find studies on that as well, to confirm that that's what's going on right now.
And it's pretty much like the more that I delve into it, the more I realize really Chinese medicine is really all about frequency. We talk about the yin and yangs. Every medicinal plant has got its frequency, and it's really just about bringing our frequency back to the neutral state. Basically.
I love that. Yeah. And I love about Chinese medicine and their wisdom. I've always been so intrigued by it. I feel maybe in my past life, I must have been in China.
I think you have. Monica, I have so much fun chatting with you. Definitely, I can sense sequels and, follow-ups coming up very shortly. To end this on, I guess, to sum up what we discussed today, right? Really, it's really about spirituality, healing, about our own path. It's really all about tapping into our inner wisdom, tapping into our heart alchemy, as you would call it. So what would you say I know it's going to be really difficult to sum up all these knowledge that you've got, but how do we best, and the reason I say it's a summary because it will cover some of the things that we have discussed today, how do you best connect to your heart and then connect to your purpose?
Yeah, I love that question. We can do a brief exercise if you like, just for the listeners, to just really feel into this. So we could, for instance, like starting off with just being still. And all you have to do is just set the intention that you're tapping into your own heart and feeling that connection to your own heart center. And I'll call it heart center, but really just connecting the energies of your upper and lower heart chakras. The upper heart chakra is a more compassionate, understanding, and loving, whereas the lower heart chakra does feel, feeling this more the human aspect of our worldly realities. But if we bring those together and just really focusing and dropping into your heart center and just be still in that moment, and you hear your own higher guidance. And all you have to do is just ask the question, what is my purpose? And so just allow that information to come through you, and you could pause if you want longer time, during this episode. But yeah, it's just as simple as just setting the intention. You're just that powerful that you can just do it yourself.
I don't know if the audience can feel that. I was actually closing my eyes while Monica was going through it. What I feel is energy, even in my own room here, has shifted. And I feel this pulling energy coming into my heart. And it's that stillness. If anyone's ever saying that I can't stay still and I can't do meditation, I think this is a great exercise as well to tap into your stillness, because when we tap into our heart, really, it's that inner peace we're tapping into. Love that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Anytime. And it was such a pleasure to be on your podcast. So thank you so much.
So how do people work with you and how do they find you?
So my website, or my email address that I provide in the notes, people are free to just email me or just go check out my website.
Or check out your podcast.
Or yes, my podcast, yes, Ascended Earth, the Transfiguration of the New Human. There's a lot of information that I share. A lot of it feels like a transmission. At times when I re-listen to it myself, I feel like I'm receiving a transmission. So I kind of go off into space sometimes. And I feel like when that happens is that there is some download of information that's coming. So I'm experiencing myself.
And if you want to geek out, seriously, Monica's podcast is a great way to geek out to anything spirituality, anything out there that you may
Yes.
not be able to find through mainstream media. So I highly recommend it.
Yes, thank you so much for this. This was
Thank
so
you
much
once.
fun. I love talking to you. So thank you everybody for listening.
Thank you, Monica. And check out check out her podcast, her website, and really just a wealth of knowledge, and such a pleasure to be here with you in this space and in the 444 Media family. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you.
Bye.